Welcome to the Cyber Center for Biblical Studies. Hi, my name is Herb Bateman. Today we want to talk about a commentary on Ezra and Nehemiah. Tiberius Rata, professor of Old Testament studies at Grace College and Theological Seminary, is here to discuss with me this new commentary, a relatively new commentary on Ezra and Nehemiah. Tiberius, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. As we think about this commentary, this was a commentary written for the Mentor Commentary series. What type of commentary is it? Is it critical? Is it expositional? Is it devotional? What type of commentary is this?
The Mentor Commentary series is supposed to be the academic arm of Christian Focus Publications. They have a Focus on the Bible series, and then they have the Mentor series. So the Mentor series is supposed to be a little more academic, but I try to write holistically. So I try to write expositionally, I try to deal with the text, but also if there's archaeological discovery that sheds light onto the text, I address it. So for example, I show a relief of Artaxerxes I, or I show a picture of Darius's tomb at Persepolis. Just that sheds a little light upon the text.
Okay. Who is your primary audience? Are you writing primarily for students that are in seminary? Are you writing for professors who study Ezra and Nehemiah? Are you writing for pastors? Who exactly is your audience?
Great question. I primarily write for pastors and Sunday school teachers, seminary students, the serious Bible student. Now, I think some Old Testament commentators or scholars could use it, but it's primarily for pastors and teachers. So I write it in such a way that someone can pick up the commentary and preach it. For example, I'll give you an example. Ezra 1 can be preached in 2 points. God moves the heart of Cyrus, and 2, God moves the heart of his people. And then Nehemiah 1, for example, can be preached in 3 points. 1, the man of God hears the bad news. 2, the man of God feels the bad news. And 3, the man of God shares the bad news. So I try to write expositionally, but I try to write in such a way that anyone can teach or preach from it.
Oh, good. Okay, so with that in mind, particularly Ezra, there are interpretive challenges that appear in both Ezra and Nehemiah. Thinking about those interpretive challenges, what would you say, if you could give 1 or 2 examples that if I'm a pastor, that you can warn me about as I think about perhaps preaching through Ezra? What are some interpretive problems that you faced?
Well, the book is not plagued by as many interpretive problems as others, for example. There are not that many textual issues. There are a couple of things that I would say could give you a little trouble. One would be the genealogies, and second one, the lists. And especially in Nehemiah, you have a couple of those lists that you need to work through. Names of people in the genealogies that might or might not fit with Chronicles, so you're trying to see what happened there. I think that those are the only major problems. The rest, since it's a historical narrative, it's fairly easy to preach through after you get over those small hurdles.
Okay. Now, I love narrative. I love Old Testament narrative, believe it or not. As a New Testament scholar, I really do appreciate the narratives of the Old Testament. Can you give me a couple of passages that are really exciting? As you think back, you've worked through both these books. Can you give me a passage in Ezra that's really just exciting to preach, and a passage out of Nehemiah that's just very exciting?
Yeah, I really enjoy Ezra 7 and Nehemiah 1. Ezra 7 I like because Ezra appears for the first time in chapter 7. That's unusual, isn't it? You first deal with the genealogies and the background, and Ezra only appears in chapter 7. And he's introduced there as, and I quote, scribes killed in the law of Moses. And then you have in chapter 7, verse 10, a verse that many can take as a life verse. You and I who teach and preach the Bible can take that as our life verse. where it says that Ezra set his heart to study the law of the Lord, and to do it and to teach his statutes and rules in Israel. So Ezra, in a way, is a great example, a role model, so to speak, for you and I and for all pastors and teachers out there. So I really like that because it sets in context who this Ezra is. He's a scribe, but he knows the law of God, and he wants to live it out and teach it to others. And then the same thing with Nehemiah 1, where we are introduced to Nehemiah, who leaves his well-paid, high-position job as the cupbearer to the king. And then he leaves, he goes back home to rebuild his nation. And I like how he's introduced also in Nehemiah chapter 1. He's shown a man who has not just a mind for God, but a heart for God. When he hears about the destruction of Jerusalem, the Bible says that I sat down and I wept. And that's a great example for us leaders who need to love God, not just with our minds, but our hearts. I can ask myself, when was the last time I wept over the condition of how things are? So I like these books because they give us a glimpse into the lives of these people who are men, like us, and yet we are all asked to live obediently and to serve in a difficult situation.
How might you encourage or go about suggesting to a pastor the preaching through? Let's just talk about Ezra. How would you go about doing that?
Well, because it's a historical narrative, I would try to preach verse by verse. Maybe not verse by verse, chapter by chapter.
Okay.
And sometimes you can probably even put 2 or 3 chapters together and kind of summarize them and preach them like that. You can do that, depending on how much time you have to go through the series. One challenge, though, with Ezra is very important to see that it's not always in chronological order. And I have a chart in the commentary, I think it's on page 47, that shows the events and the date and the chapters. So we make sure we don't confuse when these events happen. And I think that's probably one of the greatest challenges, to see that the book is not always in chronological order. But once you do that, it's very preachable, teachable, and I would probably look at it as a whole.
Okay. All right. And as we wrap up our discussion, and we do want to focus on the commentary, so when your commentary is written for pastors and students, what other works might you suggest to a pastor to use alongside your commentary? Because obviously there's only so much you can cover.
Sure.
Is there another work that might be a good complement to your work?
No doubt. And when I wrote, I used other commentaries, and I like you, we stand on the shoulders of other giants before us. I would recommend 3 commentaries, actually. Williamson in the Word Biblical Commentary series is very thorough. Fensham in the New International Commentary of Old Testament series is very good. And one that's very pastoral and very applicable, which I like, is Kidner in the Tyndale Old Testament commentaries published by IVP.
Okay.
Yeah, those are very good commentaries. I have them on my shelf, and I use them as well.
Okay. Well, Tiberius, thank you so much for joining us and telling us a little bit about this commentary you've written on Ezra and Nehemiah. And thank you for joining us. And I trust that perhaps you might place the teaching of Ezra and Nehemiah somewhere in your preaching and teaching schedule and purchase this commentary by Tiberius Rata on Ezra and Nehemiah. Until next time, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.